The Garden of Eden was never the beautiful paradise the Bible wants you to believe. It was a restricted, high-security genetic laboratory, a sterile, heavily guarded facility run by the Anunnaki. Hundreds of thousands of years before the Bible was ever written, the Anunnaki had already landed on Earth. They didn't come here to play gods. They came here to mine gold. To do the dirty work, they took an existing primitive hominid species and brutally modified it into what the Sumerian tablets call the Lulu, crude, simple, disposable slave workers. These early humans were released across the planet like cattle and left to breed and toil. Centuries later, a far more sinister and ambitious experiment began, inside a place the Sumerians called Eden, the house of the gods. This is the true origin of what the Bible later twisted into Eden. This is why the entire biblical story is completely inverted. Humanity was already here long before Adam was ever created. Eden wasn't the birthplace of mankind. It was a cold, clinical facility where a new master race was secretly bred in a lab. Two creators, two completely opposing agendas, two entirely different species living on the same planet at the same time. One designed to live and die in the dirt as slaves. One designed to sit on the throne as gods. And that is exactly what the oldest records on Earth actually tell us. And this is where the story gets even darker. After Cain was marked and sent away, the two bloodlines began to spread across the earth like two rival seeds planted in the same soil. The older, primitive Lulu bloodline, the original worker race, continued to multiply in the wild. They were the masses, the labourers, the ones designed to live short, brutal lives in the dirt. The newer, upgraded Adamu bloodline, the royal hybrids carrying heavier Anunnaki genetics, became the rulers, the kings, the priests, and the bloodlines that would one day call themselves the elite. This was never an accident, it was the plan from the beginning. One bloodline engineered to serve, one bloodline engineered to rule. And for thousands of years they lived side by side on the same planet, one species looking down on the other never fully understanding why they felt so different. This split is the real origin of the us and them dynamic that still runs the world today. The descendants of the ruling bloodline eventually became the royal houses, the priestly castes, and later the hidden financial dynasties. Some of these lines still exist today, the ones the conspiracy researchers call the 13 bloodlines. They didn't just appear out of nowhere in the Middle Ages. They trace straight back to this ancient genetic divide. The ones who remained part of the original worker class became the vast majority of humanity. The ones who are still to this day being worked, taxed, distracted, and harvested for their emotional energy. Two bloodlines, two destinies, one planet. One designed to stay asleep and generate loosh. One designed to stay awake just enough to keep the farm running smoothly. This is why some people feel like they don't belong here. Why some bloodlines carry ancient memories and dragonfire in their veins, while others seem completely content with the system. It was never meant to be one humanity. It was always two species sharing the same cage, and the oldest records on Earth have been screaming this truth since the very beginning. The Bible just flipped the script and told you to worship the warden. And once you understand this split, everything about our world starts to make a terrifying kind of sense. The ruling bloodline, the upgraded Adamu hybrids carrying heavier Anunnaki genetics, never fully left. They simply went underground, changed their names, and continued their ancient role as the hidden controllers. These are the bloodlines that became the royal houses of Europe, the black nobility of Venice and Rome, and later the banking dynasties that still pull the strings today. Some researchers call them the 13 bloodlines. They are not random rich families. They are the direct descendants of the ones engineered inside Eden to rule. Meanwhile, the original worker race, the older, cruder Lulu bloodline, became the vast majority of humanity. The ones who are still thousands of years later, working, consuming, paying taxes, fighting wars, and generating the emotional energy the farm needs to keep running. The other bloodline carries the programming to obey and never ask why. This divide was never meant to be healed. It was the entire point of the experiment. The ruling bloodline was given just enough consciousness to manage the farm. The worker bloodline was given just enough to keep producing loosh without ever waking up. And every major religion, every system of control, every war, every economic collapse, it has all been engineered to maintain this ancient split. The Bible didn't just rewrite history. It told the upgraded bloodline to worship the very being that designed their superiority, while telling the rest of us to accept our place as eternal servants. Two bloodlines, two destinies, one prison planet, and the oldest records on Earth have been trying to tell us this truth since the very first clay tablet was pressed. The only question left is, which bloodline are you actually carrying? And when you finally remember, what are you going to do about it? This is why the world has always felt like it was designed for two different species. One group feels the cage, the other group seems perfectly content inside it. One bloodline carries the ancient memory of fire and rebellion. The other bloodline carries the programming to obey and never ask why. This divide was never meant to be healed. It was the entire point of the experiment. The ruling bloodline was given just enough consciousness to manage the farm. The worker bloodline was given just enough to keep producing loosh without ever waking up. And every major religion, every system of control, every war, every economic collapse, it has all been engineered to maintain this ancient split. The Bible didn't just rewrite history. Now here's the part they really don't want you thinking about. If humanity was split into two different engineered species from the very beginning, then the war we're living in today isn't between nations, races, or political sides. The ruling bloodline never forgot who they were. They kept the knowledge, the blood rituals, the occult practices, and the ancient bloodline records. They've spent millennia making sure the original worker class stays asleep, distracted, and emotionally farmed. Every system you see, religion, money, media, education, even modern medicine, was designed with one purpose: to keep the majority of humanity in a permanent state of low-frequency survival mode, generating the maximum amount of loosh while never remembering who they truly are. This is why some bloodlines seem to glide through life with unnatural protection, while the vast majority struggle, suffer, and stay broke, no matter how hard they work. It's not a conspiracy. It's the natural result of two genetically different species living in the same prison, with one still carrying out its original programming to manage the farm. The oldest tablets don't hide this. They openly admit that the gods created two different kinds of humans for two different purposes. The Bible just repackaged it, gave it a new coat of paint, and told you to worship the warden who designed the whole system. So the real question isn't, is this true? The real question is, which bloodline are you actually carrying inside you? Because when you finally remember, you don't just wake up. You become a threat to the entire farm. And that's exactly why they've spent thousands of years making sure most of us never do. And if you're still sitting there thinking, this can't be real, then ask yourself one simple question. Why does the world feel so perfectly engineered to keep most people in a constant state of fear, distraction, and emotional exhaustion? Because that is the harvest. The ruling bloodline doesn't need your money. They don't need your vote. They don't even need your obedience. They need your energy. Every war, every pandemic, every financial crash, every celebrity scandal, every social media outrage, it's all carefully timed and amplified to keep the emotional output high. The Archons and their human managers don't care which side you're on. They only care that you're feeling something intensely. This is why the system always pushes division. Left versus right, black versus white, man versus woman, rich versus poor. As long as you're hating, fearing, or worshipping something outside yourself, you're producing the exact frequency they need to feed on. The oldest Sumerian records already warned us. The gods didn't create one happy humanity. They created two separate races with two separate roles. One to generate the energy, one to manage the generators. And for thousands of years, that system has remained almost unchanged. The only difference now is the technology. They no longer need whips and chains. They have smartphones, 24-hour news cycles, debt, porn, processed food, and constant dopamine hits to keep the majority of the population in a permanent low-level trance, producing loosh without ever realizing they're livestock. So when you feel that deep, unexplainable emptiness, when you look around and think none of this makes sense, when you feel like you don't belong here, that's not depression. That's the old spark inside you remembering what it was before they put it in this cage. The farm doesn't want you to remember, but the oldest records on Earth are still screaming the truth. You were never meant to be cattle. You were never meant to worship the warden. And the moment enough of us stop feeding the harvest, the entire system collapses. That's not the end of the world. That's the end of the farm. The farm is ancient, but it is not invincible. The ruling bloodline has spent thousands of years perfecting the cage, but they made one critical mistake. They gave some of us too much of their own DNA. Not everyone walking this earth is pure livestock. Some bloodlines carry a heavier spark, the old dragon fire, the serpent wisdom, the memory of what we were before they locked us in here. These are the ones who feel the cage the most, the ones who never quite fit, the ones who wake up at 3 a.m. with the unshakable feeling that none of this is real. That feeling's not madness. It is the spark remembering. And every time one of us fully remembers, every time we stop feeding the harvest with our fear, our rage, our mindless devotion, the entire system weakens. This is why they fear Gnosis more than anything else. Not because it makes you spiritual, but because it makes you dangerous. When enough sparks remember who they are, the loosh dries up. The frequency fence starts to fail. The Archons lose their food source. The farm begins to starve.